following is a recreation of the Artist Talk, which was given on February the 27th, 2023 at 10:30 in the morning at the Special Collections Center of the Albert Goldstein Library, the Bristol Schoenberg Center. Many people think of art as the work of solitary activity, often from an individual talent. I think of it as a collaboration of creative work. So to begin, I want to show gratitude to the people involved, from Janelle Rebel, the director of the center, to her team, to my collaborator Nick Ferreira, to the workers who printed the sunscreens, the Ringling employees who printed the sheets on the table, and more, including all the sentient beings in the Bayou. And a shout out to the Native American people who made the pottery shards that are in this exhibit, certainly not knowing that they would be put into something like that. This exhibition is a collective effort. First, let's center this exhibition. This place, Masters Bayou, is a mangrove forest in northeastern St. Petersburg, Florida. By the way, the English word for a mangrove forest is mangle, which is also the Spanish word for mangrove. On this map, you can see the word Gandhi. It is in the middle, over a little bit to the left, on this map of Tampa Bay. And Masters Bayou is connected to Weeden Island Natural Preserve, a protected spot in eastern Tampa Bay. The photos in this exhibition were taken with my Sony camera, a 24 by 105 lens, while I was seated, generally speaking, in a Costco kayak. All images are from a quarter mile from my home. I moved here in 2021, began kayaking and photographing for fun. Kept my eyes open and always came back from a paddle with pictures and questions. What is that slime on the water? Why are there tunnel cuts in the mangroves? Why do people ditch their boats there? What kind of birds are those? So I began researching. On each issue, I sought out experts. So what I can tell you in this artist talk is my general knowledge gained from some practice and some theory, a method of understanding often called praxis. One question I had was, why is this area called Masters Bayou? I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas during the Civil Rights Movement, so calling something Masters seems problematic. But it turns out that this area was named for the original white fisherman in the area, Joseph Masters. He moved from Tampa and was somehow given this land by the U.S. government around the time of the Civil War. Here's a map from the 19th century I found in the historical archives. You can see the term Masters Bayou up in the top right of the map. This is the oldest map I was able to find that had this place named in this way. Lots of ways to do an artist talk. In the few minutes I have today, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I put this together. The title of this exhibition is Towards a Philosophy of a Natural Space. I believe that reality is a social process. That is, there are some essential things, such as human love for beauty or the process of photosynthesis. But how they play out in any circumstance depends on the web of materiality around them. Dialectical relationships are constantly occurring between various aspects of a situation. So my purpose in this show is to illuminate many of these aspects. The exhibition focuses on a natural spot and is dominated by ecology, but understanding must nod to the social process. And I believe in the concept of totality. This concept drives my ideological structures. Totality or oneness is the basis of most of the religions which operate today. It's an essential part of Marxist philosophy, and maybe most interestingly, is a major component on the frontiers of thinking about the operation of the physics of quantum theory today. That is, every material thing has its own nature and its own rules of life and causation. But to understand it, you must see it in context. You must see it as part of a whole, as a one, and consider how each piece interacts with the other material things. This is what I've tried to do. I consider the whole, study the parts, and return to the whole. Many people who became artists came to this because they had talent when they were young. The talent was encouraged. Or the artist had fun with art and wanted to find a path to be able to keep doing their art all their life. And now many art students train and explore ways to think about and to show their art and maybe make a living from it. I came to art from the other direction. I'm not a talented visual artist, but I have been a writer and activist all my life. I decided to see if I could advance the ideas that are important to me through visual art. So I began photographing and studied art. I call myself a participatory action artist. This term comes out of academic research in which one participates in an activity and also takes an academic view of it, distilling it and theorizing about it. As an example, in the library in the Ringling College, I have some zines that I've made of photographs I have taken in union apprenticeship halls. Part of the legal work I do is to assist unions in training new construction workers and working to diversify these crafts. While doing this, I take abstract photos of the objects made and used by the workers training in these centers. And I've made a few others of these small booklets. While in Italy last year, I attended a union-sponsored anti-fascist demonstration and made a zine from it. And I have made zines which pair my photos with ideas I respect, like those of the Buddhist philosopher Nagarjuna, as well as ones showing the current work of the German artist Hito Steyerl. During the 2020 COVID lockdown, I worked on many difficult legal issues about how protections apply to essential workers. Many of the workers I represent worked in industries, construction and industrial, which worked straight through the darkest days of the pandemic. In addition, in that year, there was a wave of demonstrations around black people shot by police. I was living in Oakland, California at the time, which was the epicenter for much of this. So from March to August 2020, I made a book of collages and tanka poems. My purpose was to artistically record and comment on these weighty matters in a manner that was in sync with the bizarre zeitgeist of the time. So, for this exhibition, my participatory action art emanated from where I currently live and what I do and think about there. For me, this is a philosophical exhibition about a natural space. I see the ideas in visual matter. It is ecological, as it is a study of organisms and how they interact with the environment around them, but how to show this? This quote by the wonderful Caribbean poet, surrealist, and activist Aimé Césaire is one I share. Beauty and justice can and should go together. I think people hunger for both. One of the proper rules of art exhibition today is that there needs to be a consistency throughout. So quoting a Caribbean poet fits this rule, as mangroves are important in the Caribbean, ecologically and ideologically. Many Caribbean writers use the motif of mangroves as they consider life in their area. Mangroves are magically material. As I studied the use of mangroves in literature, I noted the rhizomatic character of the root systems. To me, it showed a kind of connection that I think exists in our world. Things are connected and a little mixed up. Researching, I found this rhizomatic idea is a part of postmodern theory, from theorists such as Deleuze and Guattari. I'm not a big fan of postmodern theory, but I do think the complexity of this image can tell us something about the human condition today. As I kayak around, especially at sunrise after a good cup of coffee, I often run into images that produce ideas for me. I went to Harvard Divinity School a few years ago and think about religion a lot. Not so much the ultimate questions like, is there a God or is there a heaven, but more about how the religious experience operates today, the role and use of it in society and in people's lives. When I saw this image from my kayak, I thought about the current problems that Christianity has in the world today. And as I got closer to get a better shot, I looked at the cross. The weathering of it made it look like a painting by J.M.W. Turner, one of my favorite artists. But others may see different things. Every year, sheets of naturally occurring cyanobacteria form on the waters of the Bayou. Called Lyngbia mats, these are different species of cyanobacteria all living and growing together. One day I paddled my kayak and took photos of these. I assumed they came from human pollution when I first saw them, from factories or potash mines or a recent spill in the area called the Piney Point spill or leaking septic tanks. So I sent these pictures to scientists in Tampa Bay who taught me what they are. And they are cyanobacteria, a naturally occurring organism. And as I was thinking about it, I read about human understanding of slime, a surprisingly interesting topic. Slime, it turns out, is part of a number of origin stories of religions which are active on our planet today. And this photo shows how bacteria and the mangroves interact. Sometimes this cyanobacteria forms sheets held up by the mangrove as the tides recede. Looking deeper into the science, I learned that the current thinking is that these cyanobacteria are responsible for you and me. That is, they were the first organisms that produce oxygen as a byproduct of photosynthesis. These organisms probably evolved around 3 billion years ago, and after 300 million years, the oxygen they exuded made the Earth an oxygenated planet, which it was not before then. Without that, humans could not exist. This knowledge was a fun byproduct of this art project. And as a friend of mine said when I started doing art should always be fun for those. And of course, there's the question of human habitation. I lived in New Mexico for many years, and one of my joys was providing legal representation to Navajo railroad workers. I got so interested in it that I wrote a book on their religious practices in connection with their work. I'm interested in Native people, historically and presently. On Weeden Island, there's an archaeological dig. I attended a public event there and spoke with the academic leader. A Native American culture, it seems, probably lasted in the area for hundreds of years, at least from 300 to 800 AD. And this spot in St. Petersburg, just south of Masters Bayou, is named for this culture, the Weeden Island culture. The leader of the dig allowed me to come to their building and photograph these pottery shards. This pottery, it's believed, was for day-to-day use. But like pots and pans in our homes, those who used them decorated them. As I paddle around, I feel this culture remains, and this is why I use transparency in an artist book I made with this exhibition. On a number of pages, I overlaid the designs over photos in the book. Along with my collaborator, Nick Ferreira, I got fascinated by the graphic design. So we pulled the designs off the shards and put our own color ideas on them. I believe they show quite a connection in art over the last 2,000 years. Extraordinary design and really, really amazing. And of course, there's a lot of boating in Florida. My kayak allowed me to paddle right up to the boats. Much of my work has an abstract character to it. I want to leave space for the viewer to ponder for themselves. And Masters Bayou is used as a boat graveyard for some. I found many interesting images of these abandoned boats. It reminded me of the phenomena of abandoned cars on the island of Maui in Hawaii. You can drive the back jungle roads of the north side of that Hawaiian island and see cars that people have left for the jungle to take. Here, the bayou will eventually swallow this boat if it's not towed out. And birds. One of the joys of living in this area are the number of birds, especially large ones. Vultures have carried a negative connotation over the years, but watching them circling in the thermals above me is quite soothing often, I believe. The day after Hurricane Ian, a large hurricane in 2022 in Florida, I kayaked out. Shooting into the water gave me almost psychedelic images, as much plant material was blown onto the surface of the water from the storm. While I was doing this, I saw this bonnethead shark go by beside me, about 5 feet long. I imagined it was doing what I was doing, seeing what was interesting or useful in the mangrove forest after the storm. If one is going to discuss the ecology of this body of water, one has to mention oysters. They are a cleaning machine for the bayou, filtering the water. There are numerous examples that I saw of them taking human leavings and using these leavings productively. Here they have made what looks to me like an apartment house on an old metal fence stake. Let me close with a little more about my view of art. I like conceptual art and find many pieces interesting and helpful, like the work of Michael Asher. But when art cannot be appreciated without a long exhibition explanation, with artsy words that regular viewers cannot understand, it is problematic. So I've tried to produce art that is interesting to view, which has a deeper meaning, if the viewer is interested in taking the time to consider it. They don't need to, but I offer it to them if they're interested. And I always like to return to and end with beauty. We all like beauty, even if we all have our own ideas about what is beautiful. Thank you for your time.